You are listening to the author's message with Denise Joy and Irene Pro for lively discussions and guest interviews on authors, publishers, readers, and of course our listeners. Join us every Saturday at 10 a.m. Eastern on Global Voice Radio. Here are your hosts, Denise Joy and Irene Pro. Welcome to another episode of The Author's Message with Irene Pro and Denise Joy Thompson on Global Voice Radio. In The Author's Message, Irene and I talk about all things related to the written word, and also sometimes the verbal voice of individuals who are talking about what they have written. So we will talk about books, magazines, publishing, writing, anything that is involved with an author. And today, being March 31st and the last day of observing Women's History Month, and also we observed International Women's Day, Irene and I have a very interesting topic to discuss with all of you. And we think this will be very thought-provoking, and we welcome your comments and your feedback. So Irene, how are you doing today?
I'm good now that I have a fresh cup of coffee in my hand.
And coffee is always a great thing to have early in the morning. And especially, you know what, if you're reading a magazine, you're reading a good book, you're listening to an audio book, coffee is always a great thing to have. So, Irene, you and I have read some articles recently regarding the fact that Wal-Mart is pulling the Cosmopolitan magazine from its checkout lines. Now, they're not pulling it from their stores, but they're pulling it from the checkout line.
Right, so they're pulling this magazine from the aisles. So just, as everybody understands, it's the aisles to your checkout line. So they usually have magazines, a whole bunch of magazines on there, and they're pulling that out. And I believe Cosmo pays extra to be in there.
Well, and I would think so, because oftentimes the checkout lines are where products are placed, that they want people to have those last-minute impulse buys. They want people to look at products as they're waiting in the checkout lines. And
yes,
that is sort of how this all came up, is some customers, we don't know how many, had commented that the Cosmopolitan magazines, some of the covers were provocative, some of the covers had words that were not necessarily appropriate for children, that when we're standing in those checkout lines, we really don't have a choice of what we're seeing in regards to those products.
Correct. And, Cosmopolitan, is a women's magazine. If some of you have never seen it, and it's been around for, it came out in the 1920s, I believe, Cosmopolitan, or prior to that. But they talk to women between fashion, colognes, their biggest topic and is, should I spell it out? SEX. So, and they always have this beautiful starlet. So either she's a top model, she's a musician, or she's in the movies, and they talk about, certain issues with women, certain relationships, how to love yourself. But their main topic throughout is has the word sex, sex or sexy. So, as a mother and as an artist and as a publisher of magazines, it's very difficult to constantly see, we all want that beautiful cover, but for me, I'm not a model. I've done, modeling as a little kid, as a young, I should say in my 20s, but, it was for JH Collectible, and, it was modeling their clothes, and their clothes look nothing like this on, Cosmo's cover. But I don't want, and I guess I have to agree with that, to constantly be in line with a bunch of kids and, stare at that, 24/7. It's, I'm sorry. It's like, do you want Playboy to stare at Playboy? Well, unless there's a gorgeous hunk on the cover that, is my dream man, and that's the only man I want to see. And, we went through something similar with this with Abercrombie and Fitch, and they took all their sexy big banners of people down because it wasn't realistic. And I think, we're dealing with the same scenario here in Wal-Mart.
Well, and I think there are several issues for us as adults to be aware of in this situation. So, first of all, I don't want our country to become a country of censorship, and I put that in air quotes.
Yes.
I think the fact that a compromise with different organizations that were identifying that Cosmo may have been too racy was to put it back in the area where all of the other magazines and books are at. I'm glad they did not take the magazine out of their stores, because that would have been censorship.
Correct.
And part of our freedom of speech is having access to the books and magazines. So one is censorship, and we don't want to become so narrow focused that rights are taken away. Another issue is how, when we talk about objectification of girls, teenagers, and women, is that positive in our world today? Now, historically, that's how things were sold. Like you mentioned with Abercrombie and Fitch.
Yes.
That's how things were sold. And when we talk about, Playboy and Playgirl, and those magazines now have a specific place in some stores, and other stores don't carry them at all. In the military, years and years ago, we had the controversy of those not being sold in military installation in the stores, and especially overseas. So censorship, objectification of girls, teenagers, and women, and how do we handle those things? And then also the business perspective of what do people today want in their magazines?
It's kind of hard, what people want in a magazine. We, just so to give everybody a small snippet of how a schedule for a magazine comes out and how we pick our stories or depict what month we're going to write about. So we basically kind of foresee our future in the magazines. This is what this month is going to be about. This is what this month's going to be about. And then, you have Mother's Day, and you basically sell towards each month. That's how the magazine industry runs. Okay. Cosmopolitan picks out, who's the hot movie star right now? Who's the hot buzz in the industry? And, our magazines and how we break that down, you can't always know. Sometimes you'll pull a cover or swap a cover because that's trending at this moment. And words say a lot. Your content on the cover says a lot about your publication and what's inside your publication. It just gives you small little snippets. And your cover is your selling point. It's the one that, oh my God, I love this cover. I need to read it. Let me purchase it. Is your selling tool, regardless how you look at it. And it's very hard. And some pictures on Cosmo, I like. Other pictures, are you kidding me? And I'm the first one to say, wow, we went a long way to airbrush that baby. So for me, my covers are different. My magazines are different. My magazine is voices of real people. And I will put that in air quotes. It's women of today. It's people of today. It's kids of today. It's their opinion. It's their story. And as I always say, we all have a story. Cosmopolitan, basically, Cosmo, do I read it? Yes, I do. Do I read it every month? No, I don't. Has some good issues for, years ago, had great content, women in business, women dealing in the business world in, corporate America, or fashion. And again, here we go, fashion. You see products and you see these models that are size 0. Come on, people. I don't live in a size 0 world. So, and I'm not airbrushed.
Another thing is interesting about fashion. It's like when I go shopping, and depending on the cut
yes.
of the pants or the shirt, I can buy a size 10, or I'm looking at a 12 or a 14 because of the way that it is cut.
Yes.
I have broader shoulders and a little bit of a chest. So things
excuse me,
fit all the time.
Right.
What's interesting then when we talk about fashion, it shows, so what I was going to say is those are the sizes that are gone. So now we can have an extra small as an option or an extra large. And so when we talk about the average women are buying the 10 to 12s. Yes. And so fashion isn't showing that that's what the sizes of women.
No, fashion, and I have to agree with you, but fashion really, today's fashion, and if you look in Vogue and you look in all these other magazines, and if you ventured out to one of the fashion shows, fashion is really art. It's live art walking down a runway. And it will look good on some people, other people it doesn't. But it's live art walking down a runway, and that's how I look at it.
Right. Well, and in some ways, with that concept, covers of magazines are art.
Yes.
But the magazines are in the public purview. And correct. So I think in some ways, we have to, companies that create magazines, and I think that there will be more magazines pulled from the checkout lines probably than just Cosmopolitan, because there's many tabloids and other magazines that are similar in cover or the words that they're using that you don't necessarily want your 5-year-old, your 7, 9, or whatever asking questions about. There may be some men's magazines that are pulled. We don't know the consequences or the ripple effect of what has happened with this. But I would like to see, which I'm only one person, I would like to see women dressed in sort of normal clothes, right? Most of us do not walk around in ball gowns or our swimming suit for 8 to 10 hours. What is the fashion per se? What do women look like in clothing that women are wearing today to the job site, in their business, in the boardroom?
Even when you guys network, now you hold a lot of events with women's networking groups. What are those women wearing today? Are they showing up?
Yeah, are we showing up in business casual? Are we showing up in business formal? What is the contemporary woman wearing today? Which I know there's a range, right? We are now saying that women don't have to dress in a suit and look like men in business.
Correct.
But then what is appropriate for a daytime networking luncheon? What's appropriate for a speaking event? What is appropriate or recommended? Or what are the options out there? In some ways, and I was trying to think in my mind, and I did not research this, I know that there's Success Magazine. I know that there's Forbes. And I couldn't come up in my mind with a magazine that is specifically for women in business. And are they showing, when you talk about fashion and the runway, what are we showing for women business owners, women CEOs? Let's have a fashion show and show us some contemporary clothing that goes from your meeting from 8 to 12, and then you have a networking meeting, and then you have to show up at an evening meeting, right? What are ways that we can create that wardrobe? Now, I know we've gotten a little bit off of topic in regards to Cosmopolitan being taken out of the checkout lines, but as you and I are talking, I see that there are so many more women in our world today interested in having a professional image, interested in having a healthy body image, personal self-esteem image, that I don't know that these magazine covers were addressing or are addressing the needs of women today.
Well, some of the content in Cosmopolitan does reach out to certain things that you just from the laundry list you just gave us. Okay, so I have to say, yes, with Cosmo, yes, there is other magazines, the Working Mom, and they do show, how do you balance from, the mom in the morning and your business attire and your meeting attire, and they do show different options in that. And there's like 3 other magazines, the CEO Mom.
Yes. And like I said, I couldn't, just off the top of my head, I couldn't think of those things.
Right.
And
even in some of those, they show, again, a mom who's a perfect 10. Okay.
Or size
4. And that was, the same with Crumb and Fitch, because they basically, he came right out. He does not make clothes over a certain size.
Right.
He was very upfront with that, but a lot of his clothes does run big. And so if you're a size 5, you would probably wear a size 2. And that made you feel good, I guess. I know it made me feel good. I was like, oh my God. Yeah, but I buy clothes slightly bigger to begin with because I want to feel comfortable. I do have clothes that looks like, was painted on me. I'm not comfortable in that.
Right. And that is some of the things that some of these more popular magazines, you mentioned Vogue, and we are not against magazines, and I'm not against magazines providing articles or ads that do reach out to different demographics of women.
Correct. Correct.
I think that, and since this is a public show, I think some of the words that were used in regards to the covers we cannot say.
Nope.
And there were some organizations that may be very, very conservative that also did not like the covers. So we have a continuum of perceptions, and that is what at times is difficult to determine. What is the middle ground? What is a way to reach a widespread population? Now, one of the things that Cosmopolitan or Hearst Communications that owns Cosmopolitan, they agreed with this because it was a, in quotes from Hearst Corporation, it was a business decision.
Yeah.
And sometimes that is how companies change their marketing or change labeling or branding, because what is being said by the consumers. So, Irene, you and I were talking earlier before our show, and I don't know that this is a good or bad thing that has happened. There's not a right or wrong per se. I think it's an opportunity for businesses to be educated and to determine how do they want to market their products, who is their client, and with the political climate, with the changes that are going on in the world, and especially when we talk about objectification of women, we talk about human trafficking, what contributes to all of that? What do businesses want to do today to not have those labels against them and still provide good information and not feel like they're being censored?
Well, it's kind of hard because we're human.
Right.
And, okay, we're human. So, look, computers even have glitches, but we're human, and we do judge a book by its cover, no matter, okay? It takes you 7 seconds for someone, when you meet somebody for the first time, and within that 7 seconds, you're judged, okay? But, we're reading your covers. We want to see what's on your covers. And for me, I don't put a lot of verbiage on my cover. I want people, this is who's on the cover. We give a small snippet of what's inside our covers. And it's very, very, very hard because we judge. That's who we are. We're human. We judge. And, as a business decision, I'm going to be honest, as a business decision, Cosmo could have gone 2 different ways. And they've tried one way where they polybag the magazine, where it's a sheer polybag, it's in a color, but you still can see through that. And kids see, people see. So I think it was a good idea that it's still in Wal-Mart. Now I just have to run around in Wal-Mart and say, oh yeah, I need that. But, and I wish them great success, but I also feel that this decision has also helped and highlighted Cosmopolitan. So as a business decision, going out loud and saying it globally, because Cosmopolitan also is a global magazine. It's not just an American magazine. It's global. And they have Cosmo Bride. They have So are they doing it with all their other magazines or just this one?
Well, it seemed like their flagship magazine was the one that was sort of targeted per se. And, as you mentioned, this is not the first time that Cosmopolitan has been in the news. The articles mentioned, and one article is by the Washington Post and one is by CNBC.com that you and I are referencing. And in 2015, the campaign against Cosmo had Rite Aid, Food Lion, and Kroger, which I think are mainly Southern, or they started out as Southern.
Yeah, they're Southern because we don't have a Kroger's in
Right. Yeah, I lived
North.
in the South for a while. I love Kroger. And but they had them cover up the magazine, so you couldn't see the cover per se of some of the images and the titles, which you're correct. Every title of an article, every title of a book is designed to grab attention and to make people want to buy it.
Yeah.
So, but as a woman, I guess I would like the cover not to necessarily depict a image of women that for most women is probably unattainable.
Yeah.
So how do we draw attention to people to buy magazines in a way that is more realistic?
Well, I guess we'll figure that out. I mean, I don't have a problem with my magazine, and I don't show cleavage on my magazine covers, and they're selling. So I think it's, it's really hard to say on that. I think content is king. I think the biggest thing we had on one of our covers is learning to love yourself. And it brought you in, and that was a recent issue. So, the saying is sex sells, okay? And that saying has to be out of all our vocabularies today. So, the more sexier, the more people want to buy that cover. Right. And, that's coming from the publishing industry. That this is nothing new out there. Make her more believable and pretty. And, you can be pretty and gorgeous, but also you can be very smart. And we're moving away from that. You can be sexy and smart at the same time. It's just.
And the other thing, I think, we are not saying that as anybody is beautiful and a size 2 or a size 4 or is average looking, we are not saying that any woman is not appropriate to be on a magazine.
Correct. And
what we don't want is always airbrushed, always looking the perfect 10.
Yes.
And other women not being depicted, because it's teaching girls, and research shows and
but it's not just
about
right, but it's not just, and I'm glad you brought that up. It's not just teaching girls, it's teaching men. Well, this is what your perfect woman has to look like.
Correct. So we're talking about girls, boys, we're talking about teenagers of both genders, and then we're talking about adults.
Yes.
That we are seeing the education, the images, that this is what sells per se, this is what gets attention, this is what all people should be like. Yeah. And we want to be inclusive. And International Women's Day, one of the things they talked about was gender inclusiveness. Now, they meant it in some ways, not meaning media per se, but meaning, are women included in all of the opportunities that men are, right? And do we have gender equality? Right. But I think that also as women, we can look at the inclusiveness of all women in our magazines, in our books, and in opportunities to be featured, not just one person per se, but the general population is included when we're selling products.
Yeah. And they don't, and I think what it is, it's not diverse enough, these magazines. And I have to agree with you on that. I think it gives us a lot to think about.
Well, and I think, for me, having spent many years
in the military.
in the military, providing support to sexual assault victims, discussing research which contributes to objectification of girls and women. You're a publisher, so you come in with that perspective and understanding.
Well, my perspective and understanding, which I don't like, is don't take a 9-year-old or a 12-year-old girl and put her on an adult magazine, because that opens up another can of worms.
Yes, and that's exactly what. So we don't want to be so Puritan and say not to have good-looking people on magazines. But it's, what is that when you look at it? What is the thing that comes to mind? And oftentimes in some of these magazines, it's not the fact that, oh, that person looks healthy, that person looks professional, that person represents a large portion of our population. You and I know that that's not what is attracting people, or that's what these magazine companies think. For me, I'm going to go to Money Magazine. I'm going to go to Forbes. I'm going to go to Success Magazine. So you can put a businesswoman on those magazines. When we look at the number of business women and men in our world, I would almost think if Cosmo, and they have started putting politics in their magazine, but if they even started looking at the number of women and men who are starting their own businesses and started focusing on those populations, they might increase their sales, especially after this has happened. They need to do a little bit of rebranding and remarketing.
Well, I'm sure they will. And, but, as a publisher, you have to look at all sides of the coin. And, a coin has 3 sides. And that's how I look at it. You have heads, tails, and the rim. And as a publisher, you always have to look at outside of the rim. And who are you marketing to, and who's your market? And, Cosmopolitan knows who their market is and who's purchasing their magazines. And, you'll be surprised, but it is a higher ratio of women, but there's also a lot of men that do purchase that magazine.
So, as you and I said in the beginning, we don't have the answer, and we're not labeling what has happened as good or bad, right or wrong.
I'm just glad the magazine is still in Wal-Mart. So I do like Cosmopolitan. I think I like to drink more Cosmo.
Right. And it is good that it wasn't totally censored, because it's not an inappropriate magazine.
Correct.
And we don't want emotional decisions. And some of these, and people do get emotional about causes. And there's a lot of causes going on right now, which are being heard. That's good, but we don't want censorship.
Right. And, I wish, a lot of our laws would go a lot quicker. That, than, just taking it out of and, being a publisher in the industry, it's like, I've worked for magazines like that. And, I can turn around and, as a colleague, because I am a colleague, and a sense where I wish them great success, and if they have to, polybag it, even put something, on the cover if you don't want to go through that additional expense. But sometimes it's worth it to make your consumer and other consumers happy. And, it's a give and take in the publishing industry. So, I wish Cosmo great success and wonderful luck.
Right.
But I also feel that this controversy is also going to help in their sales.
Right. And it'll be interesting to see what the ripple effect is for other companies that produce magazines with similar covers.
Correct.
So one of the things I'd like to send out to our listeners is, for our listeners, provide feedback and comments to Irene and I about our discussion. What are your thoughts of Cosmopolitan not being at the checkout in Walmart? It is still available in the store. But share your thoughts, because we want to raise the consciousness, right? We want to provide things for our listeners to think about, but not tell you how you should think. So definitely provide Irene and I with some feedback, and we do hope that you will join us for another episode of The Author's Message on Global Voice Radio. And Irene, anything else you want to share with our listeners?
Have a great weekend until next Saturday with Denise Joy and Irene Pro.